Hey guys, welcome back to Math with Marilyn. Before we get started, make sure to grab a pencil and paper so that you can take proper notes as you follow along. So, today's topic is using the distributive property. I have a previous video explaining briefly how to use the distributive property. So I guess we can consider this video part two, which is just going to go into reviewing an example that may be a little bit more complicated than some of the problems that we started with. So let's just say that this is part two of using the distributive property. So as a quick reminder, your distributive property basically removes your parentheses. This says that the distributive property, the distributive property states that to multiply a sum and or difference by a number, you're going to multiply each term inside the parentheses by the number on the outside of the parentheses. So basically your clue that you're using the distributive property is having a number on the outside of a set of parentheses, a number on the outside of a set of parentheses. And the number can be in the front or it can be in the back. All right, so let's start with this first example because it's the simpler of the two. So I always draw arrows from the number on the outside to the numbers on the inside, just as a reminder that I have to multiply that number by every term that's inside these parentheses. So when I rewrite my problem, and I always encourage my students to rewrite their problem and not try to do this in their head, especially we will see when I do the next example. Once you start including negative numbers and subtractions, it can get too complicated to do in your head. So you want to rewrite the problem. So here I'll have 5 times m. I'm going to bring down my subtraction sign, and then I'll have 5 times 3. I make it a habit to put my parentheses around my numbers and letters because it just helps me maintain an organized problem, especially once we start dealing with a lot of negative signs. All right, so once I rewrite the problem, then I'm able to do this first step because of the rule of distributive property. So once we do that first step, then you're simply going to multiply. 5 times m gives me 5m. Bring down the subtraction sign, and then 5 times 3 gives me 15. And as you already know, because this is part 2 of this video, this is my final answer because 5m and 15 are not like terms because 15 does not have an m attached to it. So this is as far as you would go. So your final answer is 5m minus 15. All right, let's try the next one. This is the main one that I want to show you. So again, I'm going to start by drawing my arrows. Even though now I'm dealing with 3 terms inside the parentheses opposed to the 2 from the first example. All right, then we're going to rewrite. I'm going to have -2. And remember, I'm going to use parentheses around it because I want to make sure I keep my problem as organized as possible. So -2, I'm going to multiply that by x. I'm going to bring down my plus sign. Then I'll have -2, and I'm going to multiply it by 7y. I'm going to bring down the subtraction sign, and then I'm going to have -2, and I'm going to multiply that by 3. Take a second and just let that process. All right. So again, we took the -2 and we distributed. We had to give each one of those terms part of that -2. My kids said, "How can you use this in real life?" And I said, "Well, I mean, it's kind of like one of those things where if you have a sister and a brother, if you give the sister $2, you also have to give the brother $2. You want to distribute it evenly. So this is kind of where that comes in. All right, so now I've used the distributive property, and I'm going to multiply. -2 times x gives me -2x. Bring down my plus sign. -2 times 7y gives me negative 14. I'm sorry, negative 14y. And then I'm going to bring down my subtraction sign. And negative 2 times 3 gives me negative 6. So here's why it's so important to make sure that you have your problem organized. And like I said, I suggest using the parentheses, because once these negatives start to involve themselves, it can be a little messy. So one thing, you never really want to have these two signs together like this. So I suggest you circle them, and then you can apply the rule. Rule says a positive times a negative is a negative. So that can be rewritten as negative 2x minus 14y. And then you can apply a similar rule over here. In this case, you have two negatives, and we know that a negative times a negative is a positive. So we're going to change that to plus, and it becomes plus 6. So now, because I don't have any like terms that I can combine, my final answer is negative 2x minus 14y plus 6. All right, I want to recap really quick. We have negative 2 outside of our parentheses. The distributive property says you take that number and you multiply it by each term inside your parentheses. That's what I did here. I use parentheses around my numbers to help me keep my problem organized. Negative 2 times x, bring down the plus. Negative 2 times 7y, bring down the subtraction. And negative 2 times the 3. Now you just multiply, making sure you remember your rules for multiplying negative and positive numbers. So negative 2 times x is just negative 2x. Negative 2 times 7y is where I got negative 14y from. And negative 2 times 3 is where I got negative 6 from. This sign came down. This sign came down. The last thing I encourage you to do, especially when it comes to testing, they're normally not going to have problems with these signs next to each other. So you need to go back to the rules. A positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. So you just change that so you only have one. And then our final answer is negative 2x minus 14y plus 6. And the reason is because none of these are like terms, so you stop right there. Whew. Well, I hope that was helpful. Make sure to click like and click share, and we will see you next time with Math with Marilyn. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them below this video, and we can always do a part 3. See you guys next time.